Good morning, everybody. Well, we are most excited about interviewing Devori as a psychotherapist and an expert in Tanya. And just especially the last few weeks, because Eda and I knew that this was coming and we were going to interview you, I really started listening to your podcast, even though I was listening to them before, but I was really tuning in and I couldn't get enough of them. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that you're very real. And you talk about your journey and your struggle. And it seems to me from listening to your classes that you've reframed struggle. So can you share with us a little bit about how you've experienced struggle and how that's changed for you?
Okay, so I think we all experience struggle in life. Everyone has their own unique struggles. And my personal struggles, in a nutshell, I think were, if I was going to define them in psychological terms, I had developmental trauma, which means I found it very hard to connect to people around me in the world. And as a result, I developed an eating disorder, and I had OCD and anxiety as a teenager. And many other forms of addiction, because really we just replace one addiction with another if our tendency is towards that. So that was my starting point. And because of the pain that I was in, I was constantly in a process of looking or searching or trying to find a solution to my problem. And I think if I was going to describe or define the beginning part of my journey to where a switch was flipped and things changed, was when I began my journey with a lot of self-hate and a lot of judgment on myself. What's wrong with me? I need to fix myself. I'm a problem. I'm bad. I'm disgusting. You name it. I had a lot of names I would call myself. And then there was a point where I came to understand that I wasn't going to change anything by beating myself up, and that I didn't create myself this way. I was not bad because I was struggling. It was an opportunity for me to learn, to grow, to connect with myself deeper, and to understand more about life and connection and the things that were important to me. And that was a big shift. That was a big paradigm shift that changed everything for me. So I think that was, I would say, what was your question again?
My question was, how do you see struggle now?
Right. I see struggle as a journey now, as an opportunity rather than a problem. And I think that's the answer in a nutshell.
Right. And so we've all been through stuff, and we all have some level of trauma, maybe smaller traumas that we don't even know are traumas. And I think we're all trying to move to a place of better health, like understanding ourselves better in connection. I feel like connection is something we all almost desperately crave. And so the question really is, what do we do with the stuff that happened in the past, right? We have this notion that we need to work through it and understand it before we move on. And then we have the previous generation who, I'm overgeneralizing a little bit here, but who often said, just suck it up, forget about it, just move on. So where's that balance, or how do you see this letting go, right? Letting go of the past, just forget about it, move on, move forward, versus let's work through it. Let's work to understand our traumas, to dive in so that we can heal.
Right, okay, so I would say that the question is, how am I functioning in the present moment? If I'm able to be fully present and functional in this present moment, as a human being, to show up with an open heart, with connection, with a parasympathetic nervous system, then there genuinely is no reason for me to have to go back and do any kind of processing of the stuff that has happened to me in the past. If I am able to be here now, then I can just acknowledge the past with compassion and just be here now. I mean, that's what the definition of being in a state of health or being in a state of joy would be, being here now. If I'm finding that I can't do that for whatever reason, my mind is my body is in a sympathetic nervous system state or a dorsal nervous system state, so I'm feeling frozen or shut down in my life, or I'm feeling extremely anxious about a lot of things that are going on and I can't really relax and enjoy anything, then I'm going to want to have to understand how my body got stuck in that state. What happened? And this is what we call trauma processing. When a person in nature, you see this with animals, that when they go through any kind of trauma, what happens is as soon as the trauma is over, they shake off the excess energy in their body that they were holding because of the experience that they went through, the excess adrenaline and hormones and stuff that are going through the body that help a person to be able to run or escape from the danger in order for them to be safe and save their lives. They shake it off and then they just resume with life as normal. Resuming as life as normal, you'll see, let's say, for example, a deer will just start eating grass again and gazing, like just grazing around, just walking slowly. It's not running, it's not looking over its shoulder, it's not saying, where's the danger coming from, what's happening next. But as human beings, one of the things that Peter Levine explains in his book, Waking the Tiger, he explains that as human beings, we have such a strong neocortex, which is the part of our brain that tries to make meaning of things, that we can't just let it go and say, okay, the danger's over and move on with our lives. We are trying to be in control by creating stories about what happened and trying to predict and making sure it doesn't happen again. So what happens is that this neocortex part of our mind, or our defense mechanisms in our consciousness, tell us you can't relax, the danger might happen again, you have to stay on high alert, you have to stay in that position, and therefore you can't fully allow whatever happened to be in the past. It's present now in the present. So if I went through a trauma 20 years ago, I'm still living in trauma now. It's as if it's happening still to me today. It's not something that happened in the past. So I need to go through a process of actually taking what happened and putting it from this amygdala part of my brain, which is the here and now part of my brain, the fear information part of my brain, and put it into long-term memory part of my brain. And there's processes on how to do that. Once I've done that, I'll find I'll be able to move back into the here and now and enjoy my life in the present. And that's what I think good therapy or trauma therapy or the kind of therapy that is necessary sometimes is important for, so that I can be here in the present. There are some forms of therapy that don't actually help a person do that. They just reinforce the defenders. They just reinforce the victim mentality. They reinforce the experience of helplessness in the person. And
don't you think there's a lot of that? Because that's actually was one of my questions for you. Is it just seems like that we've been over-therapized, and it's hard for people to get out of that or make space for somebody else because they're so stuck in their trauma. It just seems that there is a lot of that now.
There is, and I think it comes from just misunderstanding what to use therapy for. And of course, in any practice, there's going to be many different modalities and ways of practicing, and also different, I would say, goals. Like people have different intentions for going to different things, and there are some forms of therapy that are just a holding space for people to feel validated and connect and held in a certain space. The question is, do those therapies help a person to feel validated, held, and then process and move on? That's something that we need to look at. The point isn't to stay in therapy for 20 years. The point is to be able to live a functional life now in the present.
So what kind of therapist would help with that?
So what I understand about this work is that a lot of it has to do with the somatics of the body and the nervous system. So first of all, we have to understand our nervous systems, and we have to understand our nervous system reactions, and we also have to understand how to rewire those pathways in our nervous system. So this is the difference, I would say, between trauma therapy, which is primarily, it's not only mind-focused, but also body-focused. So it has that somatic aspect to it, which helps us to be able to rewire our programming. And it also contains within it the ability to process the stuff from a mind perspective as well. But a lot of our minds are very complex, and our really processing things in our minds can be a lifelong journey. We have to learn how to dialogue with our internal defenders, our internal parts inside of our mind, the voices in our head, and help them and guide them, to put our arm around them and say, we're going to go on a journey of understanding life. We don't know all the answers. We're not in control, but we can discover, we can journey through this. And whenever you come across something you don't know, I understand that you'll be terrified because that's your programming. The unknown is one of the most scary things for us. And it's okay because if we don't know something, we can ask, we can research, nothing dangerous is going to happen. So we have to learn how to use our prefrontal cortex, which is the frontal part of our brain, to be able to communicate with voices inside of our head that are coming from our amygdala or different emotional parts of our brain, in order to be able to create relationships with them, not to fight against them, right? Like I was saying in the beginning part of my journey, that's what I was doing. I was putting down those voices, I was judging them a lot, but rather to recognize that they're just very scared parts of us that really don't know what on earth is happening. They're very childlike in their perspective of life, and they need educating. They need a good parent, they need a good guide, they need good connection. And this is something that we can develop throughout our lifetimes. This work doesn't end, but this is what we would call, a journey of personal growth that we're all going through, rather than something that needs to be specifically connected to therapy. I think the beginning part of learning how to create those relationships, definitely good therapy can help with that. But then it's a journey of learning just how to maintain those relationships and be independent with that throughout our whole lives.
So you have expertise in mental health. You're a psychotherapist, and you have the unique perspective of Tanya. And your podcast is called Tanya Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist. It's an amazing podcast. I just started listening, and I can't get enough. I would love for you to share, where does Tanya come in here? Like, how does Tanya help us understand our traumas, our mental health, whatever we've been through, our struggles? Like, what changed for you once Tanya came into the picture?
So the way that I understand Tanya is that the Alter Rebbe is really explaining in Tanya that we all have 3 layers to our consciousness. We have our bodies, we have our animal souls, and then we have our divine souls. And they're all, like, I would say, like a bit like Russian dolls, one inside the other, but not really spatially, because really a soul can't be defined by space and time, but it's one that expresses through the other, that expresses through the other. And this is what we see in our, as human beings, is we see the body, and we experience through the way people communicate to us, we experience the animal soul and the divine soul of the human being that we're in conversation with, or we're interacting with. So in our consciousness, what this is the animal soul is really our defense mechanisms. The animal soul's core essence does not know that it is one with God. It does not know that it is one with all the energy that exists in the universe, and that it can't possibly be in danger, because God is good, and everything that is, nothing can happen by mistake, and everything's an opportunity for growth, and everything has purpose. It doesn't know that. So its starting point is, I don't know anything, I don't know who I am, and I'm scared. And that's where all of our complex defense mechanisms come in, and the need to control, and the need to understand, and the need to keep ourselves safe and protect ourselves is what drives us to create a lot of assumptions and stories and judgments in our mind and our child consciousness, that we have this perspective that, or this thought that if I can understand why things are happening, then I can somehow control and predict what's going to happen next, and therefore keep myself safe from it. And so often we hang out in our consciousness in this part of our being. Our whole lives we can live from this place of defensiveness, which means that every single interaction I have with life is always in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, how can I keep myself safe and right and good in this place? How do I make myself look right? How do I make myself act right? How do I make myself be perceived by other people and liked by other people in this way? And instead of connecting to my true essence and truly understanding and surrendering to the fact that I am one with God and God is guiding me on my journey of life, I might know that in theory, but I'm not living that in my internal world. So as a result of that, I will experience a lot of internal fragmentation and pain on a psychological level. And so what the Alter Rebbe explains throughout Tanya is he explains this map, and he also explains how to work with the animal soul, and how to also not only work with the animal soul, but how to develop our awareness of our divine soul and our relationship with God. And one of the main focuses that the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya a lot is, first of all, understanding how to develop the Chabad aspect of a person. The Chabad aspect of the person is the Chachma, Bina, and Das aspect of the person. In psychological terms, we would call this the prefrontal cortex function is the point in the brain where it's the beginning of that. Chachma, Bina, and Das are more than just the prefrontal cortex function, but this is where we would see how it shows up in our lives practically. Chachma is the ability to get really curious, to be open, to be in a space beyond stories. So I'm not already knowing in my mind what's going to happen next. To be in a really open and curious space where new insight and information can come through. Bina is where I'm able to logically think. So I'm not only going on old stories, I'm actually thinking, are those stories really true? Is this really happening? What's actually happening in my reality? And Das is my self-awareness, or my capacity to actually focus my attention on something for a period of time. And a lot of us don't actually live our lives from a prefrontal cortex place. We live our lives from a fear-based reality. And what does it mean to develop my prefrontal cortex? What does it mean to develop my capacity to focus my attention, to meditate on ideas and concepts for long periods of time so that I can actually integrate those into my being and feel them as if they are my reality? What does it mean to get curious and question and logically think about my defense mechanisms and if they're true or not? What does it mean to question my assumptions about life and God and what am I doing here, my purpose in life? And all of these things, when the Alter Rebbe explains, if we use our prefrontal cortex, we're going to be able to actually have choice over our impulsive reactivity in life. So our defense mechanisms or our sympathetic nervous systems, the animal soul consciousness or the trauma part of our being, is reactive. It doesn't think logically. If I'm afraid of something, if something happens and I don't understand what's going on, I could get angry. I could shout at someone and afterwards be like, why did I do that? Or I could be afraid of something and I don't even understand why. It's very reactive. It's not actually coming from a place of choice, of consciousness. And what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya is that how all of us can be conscious human beings. We can train ourselves to become conscious human beings and therefore have absolute choice over everything we consciously think and say and do in our lives. And with that, we are so empowered as people to live a life of choice, to live a life where we can live in line with our value systems, where we can connect to people from a place of true connection rather than a place of fear and a place of reactivity, which is really a very painful place to live.
Yeah, when you say empowered, and you're talking about the animal soul, I wanted to just discuss how the ego relates to the animal soul. And sometimes you can feel empowered, and that allows your ego to manifest right there. So what would you say is good, healthy confidence?
Right, okay.
And letting go of ego?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Alter Rebbe addresses this in Tanya as well. And he says at some point when a person really does become and sees that they have absolute choice over their prefrontal cortex, they've developed their minds enough, they feel very confident in their ability to regulate their nervous system, they're living in a space of here, now, and joy and connection. At some point they might start thinking that I am holier than thou, I'm better than others, I'm more important or valuable than other people in my life. And this is where the Alter Rebbe says religious arrogance comes in. But it's not only religious arrogance, it's all forms of arrogance is religious arrogance. It's I am better than you. Because I'm looking at you having a reaction to something. You're throwing a tantrum, and look at me, I'm able to breathe and connect to myself and calm myself down. And this is where the Alter Rebbe says that we need to humble ourselves. And how does he say to humble ourselves? He says that we need to acknowledge that all success is God's. If I am in this place in my life where I'm able to have this kind of choice, it's because God helped me to be here, and it does not make me innately better than any other human being. I can never know the inner journey of another human being. I can never know what struggles they're having and where they're coming from. He says you cannot judge another person until you stand in their place. And what does it mean to stand in their place? It literally means to be inside of their body, inside of their brain, inside of their nervous system, inside of their consciousness, and experiencing life through their eyes, and knowing, understanding the intensity of the emotional state they live with, the chaos of their own minds. Everyone has their own inner worlds that is very different than anybody else's. And even if I say the word anger, my experience of anger is very different than your experience of anger, because I wouldn't know because I'm not living in your body. I mean, we can say that we think that they're the same thing, but the intensity is going to be different because we're all so different. And if I'm going to be looking at someone and saying, well, I've managed to regulate my nervous system, why haven't you? That's because I don't have the same challenge as this other person. I also don't have the same awareness or the same life story or history or the capacity to understand these concepts or ideas or the inspiration to pick up this book and read it that then inspired me. All of these things that have got me to the place I am today were because God brought me to this place. And when I turn that arrogance into gratitude and I say, thank you, God, for bringing me to this place, and part of my journey is to witness compassionately the other people who have not come to this space yet. This is how I can transform my ego, to really acknowledge that all success is God's, and I'm grateful I am here. And it's not because I am better than anybody, it's because of the gift that I've been given of success in my journey. And I'm going to allow that to humble me in that sense.
And that's how you would define a healthy confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely letting go of ego.
Completely.
Because it's when you say that through Tanya, we are able to make choices. So a person can look at it, well, this was, Hashem's given me the opportunity, but this is my choice.
Mm-hmm. So Hashem has given me the choice and the opportunity, and it's a co-partnership, because also Hashem has given, some people, for example, can put in the exact same work as you and not get to the same place as you get. I've seen that many times, and I see this with clients, that I try and guide them on the exact same journey that I took. But it doesn't take them the same amount of time, and it doesn't take them the same amount of things that inspire them. One book that inspired me, another person, they read it, and they're like, it didn't speak to me. Another time, something that took me years can take another person 5 minutes, but something that took me 5 minutes could take another person 5 years. So really understanding that we're all just going on the journey, and that every time we do reach success, it's because God said, now it's time for her to experience success, or him to experience success, and to receive that with gratitude, to know that our choice is to just take our next step. But success is not the end result. Success is not in our hands. When and how that happens for us is always a gift, even though we can always choose to keep going on the journey.
I love that. So you're turning ego into gratitude.
So you're saying that happiness is something that we could work on. It's sort of an inside job. But practically speaking, in the context of, let's say, relationships, I saw this analogy, or a man was sharing. I saw it written somewhere. A man was sharing how his wife went up to speak for an audience, and someone asked her, "Does your husband make you happy?" And she said, "No, only I can make me happy." But she was in a good relationship. She did have a happy marriage. But what she was essentially saying is that only you could make you happy. And I wanted to understand, like in the context of, let's say, difficult circumstances, if you have a spouse or a child or a parent or someone who you feel is taking away some of your happiness, right? What would you say to that? Is happiness really something that's an inside job, or is it something that maybe we need to, work on externally? And I guess a follow-up question to this is, if I see someone struggling, like you mentioned, like I could do all this work, and then I see somebody else who, like, give them this book that I read that changed my life, but that book didn't change their life, and I might feel like triggered by it. Or if I say, you've got to do this, like I'm telling you, it'll change your life. Is that my issue? Is that my work to do? If I notice someone else struggling and I feel, let's say, triggered by that. I'm throwing a bunch of questions at you, sorry.
Okay, I hope I'll get that. Remind me if I forget one of them.
Okay.
So the first question about happiness, I would say, what's the definition of happiness? That's where I would start with this question. And my definition of happiness has always been a regulated nervous system, a parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details now explaining what that is, but it's really a state where the muscles in the body are relaxed, the blood flow is even to all of the organs in the body, the prefrontal cortex is functioning, I'm able to see many perspectives, I'm able to see things through the lens of, there's no threat here. I can enjoy this moment, I can be present, I can be here now. That would be my definition of happiness. A sympathetic nervous system state or a dorsal nervous system state are states where we are defended and protected and constricted, and we're not really able to see other perspectives. We're just looking through the lens of defensiveness. And you can have somebody who has every single thing they could possibly wish for in their whole lives, but if they are in a state of defense, if they are in a state of feeling threatened, then they are not going to feel happiness. They are not going to feel joy at all. And you can have someone who has nothing in their lives, but their nervous system is regulated and they can get joy from just looking at a flower or just being in the sun. Just being here now can be the most joyful experience for a human being. And if they are able to learn how to regulate their nervous system. So the first thing I would say is that, of course, learning how to regulate my own nervous system is an absolute prerequisite for me feeling happiness. If it's not that, then what I think is happiness is actually, I feel like I'm in control. Okay, that's what I think is happiness. I feel like I'm in control. So temporarily, my stress systems in my body, or temporarily my sympathetic nervous systems and dorsal nervous systems are like on the lower down, because I think I'm in control, because everything's happening how I think it should, and I think I'm safe now, so I can be here now. But the second something happens that I think is not in my control, someone says something I think they shouldn't say, or someone around me is acting in a way I think they shouldn't be acting, I will get triggered and go right back into a sympathetic or dorsal state and try and control their behavior, or try and control the external circumstances in order for me to start to feel safe again, right? So if I'm looking at the world through that lens, so I'm always going to be kind of trapped in that cycle or perspective of life. I'm not actually enjoying or being here now in the presence of life. I'm always just trying to protect myself from perceived or real threats. Mostly they're perceived threats. Because of old wiring that I've picked up on, or assumptions that I've made. So coming back to the second part of your question was, if I see somebody else around me who is not doing their work, if my reaction to them is annoyance and I'm getting dysregulated, then yes, it's because I have work to do in my own nervous system. If my reaction to them is compassion and how can I help support you, then I'm in a regulated state and I'm just seeing the sadness of the situation of this person feeling so disconnected from themselves. And I can be here as a compassionate witness to help them along their journey rather than a judgmental person in their life.
Just to take that a little deeper to the first part of Eda's question, because I know you've been open about this in that, okay, talking about happiness, in that you've been married twice. So your first relationship was very difficult, and then your second one, I didn't get to hear enough about. But the point is that there can be a really difficult situation, and then your happiness is tested a lot more, whereas you can be in another situation and your happiness is tested less. So how do you get to that same happiness? Is it possible to in a harder situation?
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger challenge. It's like, in a video game, you're going up to like level 20 instead of being on level 1, Things are being, like the heat's going up. You're being tested, that's for sure. And the Alter Rebbe has a perspective on this in Tanya that actually the reason why we get tested in life is to show us what we're capable of and bring out the best in us. So if my perspective is that, wow, I am being tested, and I wonder what this test is, and I wonder how I'm going to rise to the occasion of learning how to regulate myself and be present and be here now, even in this state of struggle and joy, and for every situation it will be a different journey to be able to do that, then I am rising to the challenge. I won't necessarily be able to do that on my first time around, especially if the test is very big, and I may need a lot of support to be able to get there. However, when I do get there and I do succeed, and I now have developed, not only in my physical, biological body and brain, the capacity to stay regulated in very heightened states of perceived threat. So I have much more choice now in my life and much more consciousness in my capacity, and I am a much more free person as a result. That's the pro. That stretches me as and I can grow as a conscious human being. Though it's not going to be easy to get there, and therefore we do need a lot of space and to give ourselves, kindness and compassion and help ourselves along the journey. And we don't get to choose our challenges in life. We don't. We get all handed, what it is that our souls needs to grow. And
now the question is, could you be happy in both situations? Sometimes you don't have the tools to, and then you end up having another experience where
if you have the tools to.
Yes, but
then
I'm saying
develop them.
If you're in a very difficult situation, should you get out of it to create your happiness, or should you stay in it?
Okay,
Do you know what I'm saying?
Fine. That's the question. Are you talking specifically about marriage?
Yeah, it could be marriage.
Okay.
I mean, we could use that as an example.
Okay. So if the
I'll just give you an example. I know somebody who's married for the third time. The first two relationships, she said she was not happy, and this third relationship, she is happy.
Right.
So was she really able to be happy in the first two relationships, but she didn't have the tools and didn't share what you're sharing now? Or did she have to get out of the relationship in order to create happiness?
I think maybe what you're asking is that did she have work to do in the first two relationships that she didn't do, that maybe looking back would have had
it's
her...
just Hashem gives us certain challenges, and is it that we need to get out of them in order to create happiness, or any situation we can be happy in with these tools that you're sharing?
Okay, so it's a good question, and there's no direct answer to it. I think that everyone has to figure this out on their own. We're always given situations in order to grow. Sometimes that growing can be to learn how to hold boundaries and walk away from something. Because especially if we're in a victim mode of everything can just happen to me and people can walk over my boundaries and it's okay and that's fine. If I notice that that's my pattern and learning to say no, that's going to be my growth opportunity. If, however, I know that I'm the kind of person who likes to get out of things quickly, and actually the work is really my own work to do, so staying and doing the work would be my growth opportunity. It doesn't mean that once I've stayed and done some work, I might then realize that I have a new growth opportunity. Like if I'm consciously aware and connected to myself as I go along, it may be that someone can, let's say, stay in a relationship for 5-10 years and do the work, and after 10 years to realize now it's time for me to leave. It doesn't, and they decided they wanted to leave after day one, maybe. But doesn't mean that 10 years of work was nothing. That doesn't mean that wasn't, and vice versa. There could be any version of what this could look like. My personal perspective on this was, and the reason why I left my first marriage was that I wanted to be able to work on my marriage with someone, to have someone who would connect and talk to me and agree to go to therapy, basically. And in my first marriage, that was not an option. So it was either I accept this is how it's going to be forever, or I leave. That was where I was at, and I had been to therapy myself because he was not in a compliance, did not agree to go to therapy, and that was the conclusion I came to. When I was getting married the second time, one of my I had maybe 2 or 3 things I was looking for. And one of them was, has he been to therapy? Is he willing to go to therapy? That was it.
That was it?
That was it. Because I thought you can really work through anything if you have 2 people who are willing to, first of all, listen and also hear and also grow. Someone who's on a growth journey and you know, of course you need basic things like you need to get on with each other and you have to have some chemistry. But if you have 2 people who are willing to grow, who are willing to listen, who are willing to see other perspectives, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. So that was like my thought going in. And so, yes, my husband had been to therapy, and he did go to therapy. We did go to therapy for many years in our marriage to figure out how to blend a family, which was extremely challenging. And thank God we have grown tremendously together, and it's been amazing. And it doesn't mean it's been easy, and it doesn't mean he's made me happy all the time. It's totally been triggering me left, right, and center for many years. But we got to a point where we've really learned how to connect with each other and how to communicate with each other effectively and really create a very beautiful space between us because we
And is that how you would define happiness? The fact that you've worked, I'm saying because we were defining happiness as well, the fact that you could be triggered and you've had hard times, but you've worked through it.
I want to use a different word. Maybe happiness it's a tough word to define. Maybe clarity. I want to just share a quick story that Rabbi Shais Taub shared that I think kind of highlights this idea of, you know, what's your work and what's not. He said that he does a lot of recovery retreats, and he said a woman came up to him and she said she was married twice, because that's what made me think of the story, and both times she was married to an alcoholic, and she left both relationships, and then she went to Al-Anon, and she really worked through her own internal stuff, and she came to a place of clarity. And she said someone set her up on a blind date, and the guy showed up at her door, and she smelled alcohol on his breath. And as soon as she smelled it, she asked him, she said, "Have you had alcohol?" He said, "Oh, just a little bit, big deal." He kind of brushed it off. And she slammed the door in his face. She said, "I wouldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that before. But now I had the clarity to do it because I did my own work." So I guess really maybe clarity is, and you tell me what you think, I mean, happiness is so arbitrary. It's like you said, it depends how you define happiness. Would you say clarity is a good goal? And if so, how do we achieve clarity? Is there like a point of clarity that...
Okay, so I think clarity comes over time of doing the work, over time of questioning ourselves, asking myself, why am I in this situation? What's going on for me? What are the internal voices in my head that I'm hearing? What am I afraid of? Over a period of time, we start noticing patterns in ourselves. We can start, understanding where these come from and why am I doing this to myself? For what reason? What am I afraid will happen if I slam the door in the face of this person? And there may be voices that say that means I'm a bad person, that means I'm not nice, and I should be the caretaker. And then you can question that. Is that really this is the kind of life I want to live? Is this really what it means to be caring for someone, to enable their addictions, and so on? And this is the process of growth. And over time of doing this process, we do get to clarity. But it takes us time to uncover all the stuff in our subconscious and all of our programming. And it's the process the Alter Rebbe calls refining the animal soul. Really, it's a lifelong process of getting to know it and to addressing its core belief systems and noticing which ones are false and teaching it new ways of being in the world.
Because it doesn't ever end. I mean, it's something
exactly.
that... So then how can you gain the clarity? Because healing is something that's always there.
And if happiness is a goal, like I'm going to be there and then I'm going to be happy, I think that is a really... we're never going to get there, ever. But if in any given moment, I can choose to be in a state of joy because I can regulate my nervous system and be here now. And I can then tap into my own intuition and my own connection with myself and see, well, what feels like the right thing for me to do in this situation when I have a struggle. And I'm not threatened by my struggles, I'm just curious about them, and I continue through my life through them. Then I will go on the journey that God is laying out for me in my life. And I will find it's full of ups and downs and surprises. And I will learn how to be in a state of regulation most of the time. I mean, it can be more and more often. It's not something that you're dysregulated and then you become regulated and you stay that way the rest of your life. It's just that over time we learn how to stay in those states for longer and longer periods of time. We, instead of being like the status quo that we're dysregulated, and sometimes we have a moment of regulation, and we can have like, mostly we're regulated, and then when stressful situations come, we find ourselves being thrown off balance, and we know how to bring ourselves back, we learn how to do it, we have to take the time to do it, and so on. But it's really the process of when we understand how to switch our nervous system states, I think that's the empowering key. And I always see it a little bit like if you know how to turn, a person can live in a life of darkness because they just don't know where the switch is on the wall. And if you just show them where the switch is, and now they could turn the light on whenever they choose, it's like, oh, I'm no longer afraid of dark because I know when it's dark, I could turn the light on. Otherwise, I'm stuck in this darkness. I'm terrified of the dark. I don't know what to do with it. I'm bumping my head against the walls, and I can feel extremely desperate as a result. But learning learning how my nervous system works, learning how the different parts of my brain function, learning how to communicate with myself, is going to set me up for a life of capacity to, I would say, maturity, to be able to think and get curious and ask questions. And instead of relying on feelings certain ways and relying on life to make me have certain experiences, I can make those for myself. I can choose them for myself.
And once you choose them and you're in a state of regulation, like you say, that leads to joy and clarity.
Even in I can also be in a state of joy even in a challenging situation if my nervous system is regulated and I see this as meaningful. I don't have to be, for example, I can be in a situation where externally something in my life is very challenging, whether it's a health issue or it's a relationship issue or something is going on, a financial issue, whatever it is. And if I have a deep sense of connection with myself whilst I'm in that, and I have a deep sense of connection with understanding the purpose of me being here, I can feel deep joy and also grief or sadness about the situation at the same time. This is one of the teachings of Tanya as well. Having joy on one side of the heart and tears on the other is a state of deep connection with oneself and knowing my purpose and being in a regulated state wherever I am.
You touched upon intuition for a moment, and well, we're three women talking, and I know there are men in the room as well, but I wanted to talk about a woman's intuition. And like you're sharing our feelings and our minds. Now, how do we know as women, because we do have strong intuition, when our intuition is right, if it's not what anyone else thinks? How do we know that to trust our intuition, which might actually be an emotion and not mind over matter?
Right, so a good way of understanding this is, again, going through the body and noticing what state your nervous system is in.
By the way, that doesn't mean men don't have good intuition.
If my body is in its sympathetic or dorsal nervous system state, which means I'm breathing short and shallow, and I feel my muscles clenching internally, and my brain is racing, and I'm overthinking things, this is not intuition, this is fear. Okay? Intuition has a sense of knowing that comes from a very deeply present place that doesn't have urgency attached to it. It doesn't have urgency attached to it. So the fear is urgency. You have to do this, right? Intuition is just like, I know that feels right. And I could also not do that, but it's like nudging me in that direction. And it doesn't come with urgency, and it doesn't come with any kind of like have to element to it.
But sometimes it can be intense because, let's say even with the Egel Hazahav, the women decided they're not being a part of that. There were things that the women did in the past. Rivkah went and got Yaakov to do everything he did so that he could get the brachas. Like, she really trusted her intuition, but that takes a lot. It can be very intense as well because everyone else around you is doing something else. So yeah. It's not always this easy thing. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, it's not easy. It's not necessarily easy. The more connected we are to our bodies, the more we can tap into knowing if I'm being driven by a defense mechanism or I'm being driven by inner wisdom. So really, I would say body awareness is key to understanding the difference. And also, women have, anyone here has wisdom, but it says that women have an extra measure of bina. We have a certain level of wisdom of understanding certain things. What does that actually mean practically? Sometimes they understand things that it's not so clear and relevant. Like on the surface, it's not so clear. It takes a little bit more of a deeper awareness to tap into that. But again,
sometimes it's one woman alone. It's not a group, so you really have to trust it. You know, and so it shouldn't have anxiety coming along with that, but it can because you're the one that's making the decision.
It can,
alone.
It can, but also when Bina is different than intuition, Bina is actual knowing and understanding of a situation. When I'm in a more regulated state and I know what's going on inside of my body and I can feel that this feels right even though other people are saying it's wrong, because I logically understand why it's right and I have, clear, I would say, like a map of what's going on here. Rivkah understood things, for example, that were not apparently clear to the situation, the other people in the situation. The women, for example, that you brought in the desert, like they knew this was wrong. It wasn't necessarily intuition. Logically, this was wrong. It was the men who they saw were being run on a fear programming. It says that the Sultan showed them a picture of Moshe's coffin over the mountain. And what is the Sultan showing us? A picture of worst case scenario, right? This happens in all of our brains all of the time. One of our primary defense mechanisms, or the animal soul consciousness, is envision worst case scenario and protect yourself from that, right? So what is this like? Oh, Moshe's dead, so we now have to quickly, within the 24 hours, already replace him. No time to mourn and grieve or be present with the loss of something, which isn't even true. It's imagined, by the way. Right? This is called being driven by fear, being driven by a defense mechanism, being driven by a sympathetic or dorsal state. Like, I have to do something, act now, protect myself from the danger, where there is no apparent danger or real danger. And someone who's present is able to say, actually, hold on a second. This goes against everything we've just been taught. Moshe's going to be fine. He's just on the mountain. We just have to wait a day for him to come. But when we're in a state of dysregulation, we can't hear people's logic. So the men were not able to hear the logic because they were in so much fear. The women heard the logic and they just didn't want to buy into it. But there was that disconnection between them. Because when we're in a deep state of fear, someone telling us don't be afraid isn't going to help us necessarily not be afraid. We need to learn how to breathe. We need to learn how to connect to our bodies, have mindfulness inside of our bodies. We need to learn how to actually turn off that switch inside of our own system and move our bodies in specific ways that can regulate. And then our prefrontal cortex function can come back online and we can be like, oh, hold on a second. I was just driven by madness. I was just driven by fear. And that then I can come back, like almost wake up from a trance.
So we have to be, like you say, in a very regulated state, and then we can really trust our intuition.
Right.
Would you say our intuition is our godly soul?
I don't know if I can say that, no. I think our godly souls are probably much more than intuition. I think that maybe a part of them might be intuition, something of them. But I think also we have intuition. People have intuition when, everyone has intuition on some level. You can have intuition from the animal soul as well when it's regulated. The animal soul is not only driven in that way. You have animal souls that are regulated as well, that you can tap into intuition.
So fear blocks intuition, and if we want to be able to access our intuition, we need to be able to identify fear.
Yeah. First of all, know I'm running on a fear-based program.
Right.
I have to have enough self-awareness. I think this is really important for us. We have to have self-awareness in order to be able to regulate ourselves. A lot of times people actually think that they're very calm, but they're actually in a complete frozen, shut down state.
Right, that's the thing. It's like, how do we know? What questions can we ask ourselves to be able to identify? Like, am I in fear or am I not?
So body awareness. What's happening with your muscles?
What is that? What's body awareness? Like, what does that look like?
What's happening with my muscles right now? What's happening with my breath? What can I feel in my body? Does my body feel heavy, lethargic, shut down, constricted? Does it feel light and joyful? Do I feel energy flowing? Can I feel love? Can I feel joy? Am I feeling numb inside? Am I feeling terror? Do I have butterflies in my stomach? Do I have tightness in my chest? What's happening to am I constricting my calf muscles? Am I curling my toes? How am I breathing? What's happening to my diaphragm? This is how it's going. Our mind can play tricks on us. Our minds can lie to us, but our body does not lie, and our body does not play tricks on us. If I'm scared, my body will react in fear, and if it's not scared, it won't. It will be here now, right? Because my body is like the animal. It just, once the danger's over, unless my mind tells it the danger's not over, right? And then it will stay in that constricted state. So going through my body is what's going to give me the most clearest information to actually have the awareness to know what's going on for myself.
So are there any specific teachings of Tanya that you personally connect to? And can you share maybe a practical example of something you experienced where that teaching or that principle was able to kind of help you through that experience?
There's so many. I have to think of one. I think trying to think. One, this is really hard. This is the hardest question you've asked me.
You can share too. It said he held this sign 10. I think it means 10 minutes. But
Okay, we've got 10 minutes left.
well, yeah, maybe it's 7 now. So
Okay.
you can get through 2 stories.
Okay. So I think one of the things that the Alter Rebbe explains or shares in Tanya is about the importance of meditating on the unity of God. And that he says that this is something, once we actually process or actually, there's a difference between knowing something in your head and experiencing something in your body, right? And he talks about the concept of das. Das is the ability to focus your attention on something for a long enough period of time to create emotions or body experiences of this particular thing.
Just for a second, body experience and emotions, aren't they 2 separate things?
They are very intertwined because we feel emotions in our body. If not, we're in a disassociated state.
So you need to feel both in order to really feel the emotion.
Right, so you have to feel, for example, love is the expansion of the heart. Love is a feeling, as in I'm feeling something in my body. It's not an idea, it's not an intellectual concept. Neither is fear an intellectual concept. It's an emotion, which means like actually in my body integrated, like an experience. It's an experience. So if I am going to live in a world where there is so much confusion, and I am going to experience myself to be the true expansive light that I am, I need to actually spend time meditating or focusing on that until I actually feel that I am that. Because until I give myself that actual visceral experience of connection with God and the oneness and unity of God, which basically means I exist within God all of the time, and it's impossible for me to be disconnected from God, even if I tried. And that every single step I take and every single thing that I experience is an experience of God being with me and talking to me. And if I really meditate on that, how would I feel? Right? And the Alter Rebbe explains so many places in Tanya that unless you actually meditate on this and spend time focusing your attention on it for a long period of time and bring yourself to have these emotions, of course you're going to be driven by your defense mechanisms because you're not going to feel who you really are. You're not going to feel the truth. You're going to feel that you're lost. You're going to feel that you're confused, and you're going to feel that you're disconnected and separate from the world. And therefore, you're going to feel fear, and you're going to feel the need to have to prove yourself and have to become connected. And I don't think there's enough talk about this. Talk about learning how to focus our attention, learning how to meditate. There's not enough talk on teaching people practical tools on how to actually create emotions and experience spiritual experiences through meditation that can then carry me through the challenges of my life, because there's a very big difference between knowing something and experiencing something. There's a very big difference between really knowing something as an idea. Like in theory, I know God is everywhere, but what would happen if I lived with the felt experience of God being everywhere? How would that change my life? It would absolutely change my life. But then we're not given like enough space or tools, unless we, especially in, I would say, like the Jewish education system, to actually learn how to sit down and create those experiences in ourselves. And I think that's so important.
So how did you personally do that? How would you do that?
Well, I'm in the process of learning how to do that. I'm in the process of understanding how to do that. And first of all, learning how to focus your attention for longer periods of time. I think the first exercise that I ever did, which you can use this exercise for years and always get better at it. Just learning how to keep your attention on something for 10 minutes without your mind coming and taking your attention away. So
doesn't it start in the mind?
Yeah, well, it starts in the mind because you have to use your mind to focus on something.
Right.
And then you develop a felt sense of it eventually. So there's a very basic exercise that I started doing, which I'm going to share with you, and I found it to be very, very helpful. And it goes like this. So 10 minutes of focusing your attention on something for a long period of time. Now, the mind likes to be active. It does not like to be still. So what you have to do is you have to move your mind around that specific thing. So let's
Can you give an example, like just, an example of what you would want to meditate on?
So when you're learning how to develop your capacity to meditate, it doesn't matter so much. Eventually, you want to meditate on ideas. But in the beginning, could be just a cup. And you want to learn how to focus your attention on this cup for 10 minutes straight without your mind coming and thinking about your shopping list or going to what do you have to do next after this, or how tired you are, or the message that she just sent you that you didn't respond to. I mean, our minds are constantly like a flow of like just distraction, and run. It's like running on this like energy of trying to just take us away. And what would happen if I chose for 10 minutes to focus my attention on this one thing? Of course, my mind is going to come and try and divert my attention. But every single time I just notice that my attention has been diverted and I bring my attention back, I'm practicing this muscle. It's a muscle. And what I can do to help myself with this muscle is to choose to move around in my consciousness. So, for example, if I'm thinking about a cup, I can focus my attention on the rim of the cup, and then down the edge of the cup, and around the cup, and notice the shades of the cup and the color of the cup. And I'm focusing my attention the entire time on the cup, but I'm choosing to move my mind within that. And if you choose to focus on an idea, it's the same thing. As you focus on a particular idea, but you go through the details of the idea one at a time, and you move your attention around it so that your mind isn't still, because as soon as your mind is still, something else will come in and take it away. And in the beginning, you probably still will get sidetracked. And every time you just remember, okay, bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. And after doing that every single day for a week or two, you'll start noticing less and less of those distractions are coming in, and you're going to get better and better at holding your attention. Once you could do 10 minutes straight, stretch it to 15 minutes, stretch it to 20 minutes. And what you're doing is actually literally taking your prefrontal cortex and putting it in the gym. You're strengthening that part of your brain, your capacity to choose what you think about and how you focus your attention. And our attention is the most powerful thing. It's the most powerful thing. Our attention is, it's the power of love, really. When children are playing and they say, watch me, really they're saying, love me, right? When you sit and watch me and place your attention on me, that's the biggest gift that we can give. To somebody, to anybody, to ourselves, and also then to realize the power of our mind when we focus on something. When we focus on it for long periods of time, the power that can create inside of us and inside of the world. And especially, learning how to control our thoughts is really, really empowering.
That's really cool, because as you're talking, I'm thinking that's what we can do with negative thoughts. We have this negative thought, and then we think about everything around that, within it and outside of it, and on all different ways. And you're kind of saying to do that, meditate on the positive thought in that way. We know how to do it with the negative thoughts.
Tough exercise to do these days because our attention is so scattered.
Exactly.
But it's attainable, and it's very empowering. And I think all the things that you shared are I think they're very hopeful, meaning we can all tap into some of these tools. And no matter what a person is going through, there's always something that we can do to move to a place of joy, clarity, no matter what. That's what it's sounding like.
A regulated space.
To really just learn how to regulate our nervous systems.
So I know we're going to have some questions, which we have 2 minutes.
A few minutes, but we always end our podcast with a parting message or a favorite quote of yours. So we'd love for you to do that.
And then we'll see if we have time for some questions.
It's another thing from the Tanya, and I did not create myself this way. This is one of the meditations that the Alter Rebbe says we should think about to take us out of a state of sadness, or what he means depression, because there's different types of sadness. He's talking about a heavy kind of sadness, and a lot of times that heavy kind of sadness comes from blaming ourselves for the ways our minds work and the experiences that we're in. And just the thought of I did not create myself this way really just helps us to let go of that blame and to start thinking, so what do I want to do about it? So I'm here now, what next? It's very different than how did I get here? I'm so stupid, just okay, God created me this way. Let's see how we can work with it.
Okay, so I think we'll take 1 or 2 questions, but if you do want to hear more of Devori Nusbaum, which I would imagine you do, I certainly do, she has a podcast called Tanya Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist.
It's actually Chassidus Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist.
Chassidus Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist. And also, we're going to put this session on our platform, maybe your platform if you like to as well, so that if you felt that this was helpful and you want to send this conversation to someone else, we're going to make that happen.
And Devori's coming out with a book, which we're very excited about.
I'm also...
So her podcast is called Chassidus Through the Eyes of a Psychotherapist.
It might be easier for you to go through my website, which is devorinusbaum.com.
Okay, or devorinusbaum.com.
Because it's very long to remember the podcast name, but there's a link on the website to the podcast and also other podcasts that I've been interviewed on.
Yeah.
So I spell my name DEVORINUSSBAUM.com.
And so it says Inside Out Live, but our podcast is From the Inside Out with Rivkah and Eda. So that's our platform. And I noticed you had a question.
So some wonderful tools. But my question is, if you know a person or you yourself are in a very dysregulated, agitated, anxious, mental state, what is the first practical thing that you can do to try to calm that sympathetic nervous system and move
So the first thing I would do is get a straw, cut it in half, and start blowing through the straw, okay? Because what it does when you blow through a straw is it slows down your exhales. In the beginning, you'll find it hard to exhale for a long period of time, but try and stretch it each time. And do this for about 5 to 10 minutes. And while you're doing it, tell your mind, whatever it is that we're worried about is solvable, but not without our prefrontal cortex is online, okay? The amygdala thinking is circular and fast, and it's scary, and makes stories, and worst-case scenarios, and it's trying to protect you from danger. And if you just tell your mind, I know you're trying to protect me from danger, but right now I need my logical thinking brain online in order to be able to access my inner knowing about what I want to do here. So first, what we're going to do is start breathing in this way. And when we start feeling more calm and relaxed, I am sure we are going to find a solution. It's going to be okay. So first, we're going to sit and breathe for 5-10 minutes and have compassion on ourselves for how much fear we're feeling. And recognize that it's really hard to feel that much fear. And when you start noticing your body relaxing, and one of the symptoms of that is that actually we'll take a one time through this process of breathing, we'll take a big sigh of relief. You know, like when you know, like there's like almost like when you see kids are crying and then they're calming down, and at some point they do like this deep shudder, and then you realize that then that's the nervous system switching into a parasympathetic state. That's what's happening. And so when you notice that your diaphragm starts to expand and open and your muscles start to relax, then you can start getting curious about what do I think I want to do here. And it might be, I don't know, so who do I want to discuss this with? What support do I need? And that's a starting point.
You think the body is the first place to start? Because what about going like straight to Shara B'tachon?
So the body definitely has to be a first place to start, and I'll tell you why. Because trust is not an idea. Breathing into the body is actually, when the nervous system regulates, that is the definition of what trust is. Trust is not an idea, it's not a logical concept. Trust is, I'm actually calm. I'm actually relaxed. I'm actually not anxious in my experience of life.
But sometimes learning it can help. You know what I'm saying? That'll get you to that state.
So that definitely when I then have questions as to actually what am I in control of and should I be doing something more, then yes, I need to tell my brain, we're going to learn some Shara B'tachon now, and that's going to give you the clarity to know actually if there's something you should do or shouldn't do, what's in my circle of choice, what's not, what's my what's my responsibility here, what isn't. But if I'm going to be learning that from a place of theory, let's say knowing that God is in control, but my heart rate is still beating fast and my diaphragm is still constricted and I'm still feeling clenched and uncomfortable, then that's not trust.
We're finished. We're just taking some questions.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, thank you. We could have sat here much longer.